Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
My goal this season has been to drill down into strategy and underwriting to show why people struggle to get started or face serious growth limitations. While we've covered that from many angles, I felt one area needed some explanation. I constantly hear people saying, deals are overpriced. I can't overpay. Cap rates have compressed too far. While I initially wanted to tackle that by zooming in on strategy and underwriting, I now want to take this opportunity to address exactly that. But from the overpayers standpoint. Are people really overpaying right now? If so, why? If not, where do people mistake overpaying for what would be and should be a completely fair deal? And more importantly, what can we do to grow our respective businesses? Chapter 1, Overpaying. To be direct, rents are artificially low. I've said before that a true comp isn't Billy Joe's trailer park down the road. Most mom and pops don't charge what the market would be willing to pay. For that reason, we see a delta between what lot rent should be versus what mobile home parks actually charge. This keeps appraisals low. This holds back lending at a higher LTV. This slows the overall consolidation of the industry. This, generally speaking, is really good for you and I. But this requires raising rents, and possibly higher than you might be comfortable with. Now, if you, like me, aren't comfortable with raising rents aggressively, well, I have bad news for both of us. Some companies don't share that hesitation. Try this. Go back on a deal you passed on because you thought it was overpriced. Run the numbers this time at lot rents $100 greater. Then try $200. Then try $300. Think that's crazy? Some outfits do this. Correction. Enough outfits do this to make the market seem frothy and overpriced. However, are they really wrong? I'm starting to realize that in some markets, they aren't. And if that assumption proves true, that rents are artificially low, then most outfits aren't actually overpaying right now. And you are missing out. Chapter 2, Per Pad Pricing. I have an overly basic valuation method where I take the first digit of the lot rent and apply that to the first digit of the per occupied pad sales price. For example, a lot rent of $300 would yield $30,000 per occupied pad. While this method does not produce perfect results, it can be really useful in a pinch. Find a deal in a market where you need to make an offer on the spot? Bam! You now have a useful tool you can use. Sam Hales, for example, explained how he does something similar on a recent interview I've done with him on the podcast. Have another listen to how he logics through acquisitions on per pad pricing. Now let's do an example. Say you have a park that sports $300 lot rents in a market where you know you can get $500, and the seller wants $40,000 per pad. Using this overly basic valuation method, this seller wants over market pricing. 300 lot rents mean $30,000 per occupied pad, so $40,000 per occupied pad yields a 33% over market asking price. On paper, that's ridiculous. In practice, it's not. Why? Think about it. Once you get those lot rents to fair market of $500, the property will be worth $50,000 per occupied pad, meaning you actually bought it for a 20% discount. At least, that's what these bigger outfits do. To them, that $10,000 per occupied pad delta means intrinsic value at acquisition. So while you sit there frustrated at what looks to be an overpriced deal, another outfit gets excited at a real opportunity for a fair price. Chapter 3, Leverage. The higher the loan amount and or the higher the quality, the lower the interest rate and better the terms. What does this mean for you? This means the more you acquire, the higher prices you can pay. Think about it. If you can obtain lending at 3% and your competition can only obtain lending at 5%, then you can afford to pay a 5 cap going in while they can't. In this way, economies of scale don't just apply to operations. Groups with competitive and creative lending options in their back pocket can just do things normal folks can't. I've tried for years to win over banks to try and score some competitive lending relationships. For the most part, I get ignored or lumped into the same category everybody else does. It hasn't been until recently that I've started to have some seriously interesting conversations. Why? Scale. I now post some serious loan figures. Chapter 4, Portfolio Consolidation. Similar to lending, magic starts happening in scale. The more lots, the more gross revenue, the more power at your hands to hire employees, contractors, or just in general throw money at problems. Lots of people I've met over the years buy first, operate later. While I've seen that strategy fail many times over the years, I've also seen a handful of folks pull it off. Issues do compound with time, dooming teams that bite off more than they can chew, that largely ignore operations for far too long. Then, once they do hire someone, they basically ask the near impossible to right the ship. It's too far gone at that point. I've seen lots of teams try and buy stabilized deals only, thinking if this business is truly a coupon clipper, a high-quality operations team isn't actually necessary. Well, that too compounds in time. We have plenty of stabilized deals that in scale would also start to break down if left ignored or to a low-quality property manager. Mobile home parks function like lawns. No matter what type of grass, if you don't landscape, it'll get out of control in time. Issues aside, plenty of outfits sport quality operations teams, and these outfits can afford to get more aggressive, leaning on their talent to thread the needle. I have seen this time and time again. I'd like to think Ian and I fit this description too. Buying things no one else wants and making them winners due to strong on-site operations. Long story short, outfits with strong operational teams can afford to overpay, leaning heavily on smart and efficient teams to smooth out riskier acquisitions. Chapter 5. Our overpay. 3 years ago, Ian and I overpaid for an asset. We paid lower 20,000s per occupied pad for a property with nearly all park-owned homes and lot rent of mid to high 100s per month in a market that featured low 200 lot rents. Using that shoot-from-the-hip approach, we should have bought this property sub 20,000 per pad, especially since the asset was smaller, featured older homes, and had private utilities. It didn't feel great. Worse, the park-owned homes ended up needing tens of thousands in deferred maintenance. Then we struggled with some infrastructure issues. We broke even year 1 and year 2. Year 3, we turned a decent but nothing exciting profit. That doesn't sound great, right? We break even for 2 years, inherit some serious headaches, and then don't turn a real profit until year 3, all for a smaller property? Well, it turns out this deal makes a ton of sense. First, at the time, Ian and my time were getting pulled in too many different directions. We didn't have enough lots in the market to hire a full-time employee. This acquisition allowed us to do exactly that. Hire a full-time property manager for that market. That alone freed up an enormous amount of our time and made the acquisition worth it. Better yet, 3 years later, that market exploded and now features 400 plus lot rents and growing. In other words, once we get our residents to true market, we'll be sitting on $40,000 per occupied pad sale price, doubling the value of the initial purchase price. I'm seeing this over and over in the market. Outfits come in, raise rents to true market, and then bam, everyone else starts raising rents. While this property started in the 100s, now we sit in the 300s, and we have our eye at other properties in the market at 400 and climbing. While we don't have plans to get overly aggressive raising rents to what the market is today, we still took folks from the mid to upper 100s to the lower 300s within 3 short years. That might feel aggressive to you, but our folks have stuck with us. They've seen all the money and the work we've put into this property, and they want to stick with us. They see the market, and they see what we charge, and they feel like it's fair. Now, could we gas this thing up to 400 and change right now and get away with it? Possibly, but that's not what we plan to do. Now, another group might do exactly that and beat me at my own game, and not lose many residents in the process. This is where your ethics and capitalistic decisions will come into play. You might want to ease into the rent raises, or you might not care. Your ethics may limit your growth. Or the opposite. Your ethics might keep you from winding up on the news or losing tons of residents. Regardless, what felt like overpaying years ago, what continued to feel like overpaying for years of breaking even, all turned into a winner of a property. Why? Well, it turns out lot rents 3 years ago were artificially low. Did the market really explode? Did people really go from being comfortable at 200 to 400 within a few short years? Or was the market really much higher a few years ago, but we didn't see it at the time? Chapter 6. Great Deals versus Great Businesses. Warren Buffett said, "It's far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price." If I told you that you could buy Tesla stock or Apple stock 10 years ago, but you had to buy the stock for 10% over market price, would you buy it? Heck yeah, you would. Why? Because those stocks have multiplied in value over the last decade. The same applies to mobile home parks. If you had told me that that property that I mentioned earlier had the chance of being worth $40,000 per pad within a few short years, would that have made buying it easier to stomach? Of course! And that's how a lot of these outfits view mobile home parks right now. They pay what they deem to be fair prices for what they deem to be wonderful companies, not wonderful prices for fair companies. Chapter 7. Is this a bubble? Okay, so the obvious question becomes, are we in a bubble? People are overpaying, over-levering, buying based off of bank loan rates, gobbling assets before figuring out how to operate them, and on and on. This story feels familiar. This feels like an obvious bubble. But you heard it here first. Now, I may eat my words, but I will say this publicly. As of the summer in 2021, I do not believe we are in a bubble. There. I said it. Hold me to it. Why do I say this? We just went through a pandemic, and collections went up. Inflationary times already have arrived, and multifamily investments hedge against inflation. Again, lot rents sit artificially low. More people realize that every day. Outfits that don't operate well will get saved by a rising tide. I've seen it again and again over the years. Plenty, and I mean plenty, of outfits that don't know how to operate have sold at higher and higher prices, even with atrocious issues on their properties, and make out like bandits. While you laugh at or ogle in disbelief all of the stupid acquisitions you see happening right now, just know that Mr. MHP IRL thinks they'll be just fine. And they'll be just fine because people like me realize that lot rents can be and should be much higher than they currently are. That doesn't mean I'm not disappointed to see this happening. I want what's best for this space, and what's best for this space are good operators running good properties. Rather, I am saying this now to let you know so you can get in the game and help. Go. Find your way into the space. Seriously, go be a great operator. Don't let fear slow you down. In a few short years, the lot rent comps will reflect the true market. At that point, then yes, if things continue like they are today, we will be in a serious bubble. But for now, bad operators will continue to get bailed out by a rising tide. Get out there, people, and get in the game. Chapter 8, The Next Wave. So, what's the next wave of opportunity? Obviously, the lot rent window will close within a few short years, but once that closes, mobile home parks will still have another gold rush. That gold rush, in my opinion, will be through strong operations. If the golden age of mobile home parks, where coupon clipping passive investments existed everywhere, sported lot rents of $100 to $200 per month, and the current market sits at plus or minus 300 and growing, but should be, let's say, 500 or more, then the next logical move is to get folks from 300 to 500. Let's stop talking about the golden age where rents and acquisition prices were lower. That's over now. So if the lot rent window from, say, 300 to 500 closes, what's next will be getting lot rent from 500 to 600. In a fair, capitalistic free market, the way you get the rent from 500 to 600 would be by offering greater value to your residents. I mentioned that in a former episode, so I won't spend too much time there, but I will say this. That comes from strong operations. The next big wave of opportunities will come from operational lifts. If you can build skills of turning around properties, I firmly believe you'll be well positioned for ongoing success in this space for years to come. Chapter 9, Operational Focus. Those strong operators will focus on the following: selling homes, infilling homes, delinquency, violations, lease up, and contractors. Selling homes can be tough. You often need licensing and frequently need strong sales skills. But if you can find the good people, you'll be able to take a property to that next level and do well for all parties involved, from the residents to the investors. Infilling homes may be the most difficult form of upside. Spending $30,000 to $70,000 buying, moving, setting, decking, skirting, rehabbing, and plugging in the electrical, water, and sewer connections can be debilitating. But some have cracked this code. These folks who figure out how to bring the life back into vacant lots will do very well going forward. Delinquency. Look, your property only performs as well as it collects. High lot rent means nothing if the money doesn't hit the account. Most I know don't want to mess with high delinquency, and I don't blame them. In my experience, you rarely convert a poor payer to a strong payer. They usually stay poor payers until they just leave. But where fear exists, so does opportunity. Violations. Just because your P&Ls look great doesn't mean the property shows well. Siding homes, fixing skirting, cleaning trash, beautifying the common areas all lend to a higher star quality rating and thus better debt and higher sales prices. Not to mention potentially higher lot rents. Control the violations and you might upgrade your star rating. Lease up. This falls into the selling bucket, but I want to add a layer to this. Tenant-owned homes sometimes turn over. People sell them out from under you. People get evicted. You'll need to build local relationships and have a good finger on the pulse of who wants to move in and who out. Those outfits that can continually stay on top of this will do very well now and going forward. Contractors. Having strong contractors is a competitive advantage. That's a big reason why I taught myself Spanish. Regardless, you'll want a reliable squad to call on that's willing to travel with you if need be. We've achieved this over the years, and it has saved us many a time. having good people, the right people, will take you to that next level. To be blunt, I don't feel like people are overpaying. I don't feel like we are in a bubble. I do feel like some bad eggs will continue to get bailed out by a rising tide. I do feel like good people like you, my listener, need to get in the game or at least get more involved. You need to be buying properties. If you are willingly listening to mobile home parks in real life, which serves as the operator's podcast, then you are well poised to do wonderful things for our space. Sometimes the bad guys win. I've said that on episodes past. Perhaps this episode now gives you some additional insight and color around why the bad guys continue to overpay and get away with it. And that answer is simply that they aren't overpaying and or they aren't operating. This leaves room for you in two areas. Number one, you can start paying more and getting into the game because you can now charge more for your lot rent than you thought you could. And two, eventually, these knuckleheads will need to sell at a reasonable price to a good operator like you. And if you believe mobile home parks are wonderful businesses, then like Warren Buffett would say, start paying truly fair prices. Entrepreneurs make mistakes, but with the overwhelming amount of free information out there, you don't have to be doomed to making those same mistakes. You just have to find a consolidated version of the most important information. What if I told you I'll gift you all of my DD mistakes I've made over the years for free? Just leave me a 5-star review, screenshot the review after it goes live, and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, join our Facebook group, Mobile Home Park Mastermind. You'll find hundreds of other mobile home park owners sharing ideas, contractors, and deals. It's free to join, and we would absolutely love having you join us.